Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen out there in internet land. This is reasonably fine artist Charlie Hunter doing a special crit session for my friends, the Dreamliner artists. Now, who, you might ask, are these Dreamliner artists? Well, about 125 days ago, when the pandemic was just a gleam in our president's eye, Eric Rhodes started doing a daily Facebook Live at noon Eastern Time, where he kind of talked about issues facing artists and, like about marketing and about the business of being an artist. And it has developed a very, very loyal following. And because Eric's company is called Dreamline Publishing, and they publish Plein Air Magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur. They put on the Plein Air Conference and a bunch of other conferences. It's called Dreamline Publishing because both Eric likes industrial design of the 1930s, and he figures he can make a more streamlined operation than his competition. But because it is called Dreamline Publishing, the group that became the loyal followers decided to start a Facebook page, and they called themselves the Dreamliners. And now yesterday, for Facebook Live, I did a critique session where I critiqued 12 paintings that had been submitted for Plein Air Live. There were 138 individual painters submitted works, and many people submitted multiple works. So there really were close to 200 or maybe more than 200 paintings to choose from. I only was able to critique 12 in the amount of time I had, and even that was a little bit rushed. And so because I've joined the Dreamliner artists, I thought it'd be nice to crit 5 paintings that were submitted by Dreamliners on this special little Facebook Live that will go up on the Dreamliner artist page. It will also later be up on my YouTube channel, my fast growing library of YouTube hits. They're hits. They're going viral, but not in a bad way. They're going viral in a good way, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, join us now for about 25 minutes. We'll kind of quickly review these 5 paintings and just kind of hopefully ways of looking at art that are helpful for the working artist. My beloved, the great Betty Sue, is behind the scenes here, ladies and gentlemen. She's down in Austin, Texas, even though I'm up in Vermont. She's behind the scenes, pulling the strings, making sure everything goes smoothly. So you'll hear me say, Betty Sue, the next slide, like I'm going to say right now. Betty Sue, the first slide, please. And here we have Katy Smith, Dreamliner Katy Smith, doing a watercolor. I believe this is Scottsdale, Arizona. It's Old Town somewhere, but that's the title and the location is unimportant. Let's view these as compositions in a 2-dimensional world. I think this is a lovely painting. It has a wonderful balance of light and dark. It divides the page up nicely. The eye travels in a really compelling way. Let's talk about how the eye travels. Betty Sue, you've got a cursor, I believe, and we can try having it go from the lower left with the yellow line, how the eye travels up to that traffic, hits those cars, boom, and then goes right to the left. Exactly. So there's the automobiles provide a wonderful foil to keep the eye from going. What very often happens with paintings is the eye will start like there in the lower left, travel right up that roadway, and go right off the surface over on the right. Exactly. And she very intelligently gets over that hurdle by having the automobiles there. Look at the wonderful balance of the color world. The green of the foliage travels throughout that mid-picture plane. The darks of the automobiles, the undercarriage of the automobile, the one dark automobile, then the dark of the market doors, and then very importantly, the dark of that SUV on the left-hand side, where heading out on the left, the last automobile that's visible. There's also the darkness of the roadway when it enters the picture plane. But look how she lets go of various edges, and she doesn't overdraw anything, which is why it works so well. Look at the undercarriage of the SUV on the right, the furthest one over. She just indicates where the tires are. She's observing very, very carefully. So probably working from a photo, but because it's traffic, unless she removed the batteries of all those cars, it's probably a photo. But the wheels of the car are just indicated. They're not overly drawn. And on the right-hand side of the car, it's just a dark form. And then the car to the left, behind the dark SUV, that is just an abstract collection of shapes that we read as an automobile. The dark automobile is nicely not overwrought. But then the one I really love is that furthest on the left one, because she lets go of the side of the automobile and the foliage that is being hit with all that light that's in front of it. And it reads really, really well. The sidewalk in that same passage is handled beautifully. This is a really nicely disciplined painting. In terms of areas that could be thought about, the sky, I don't know what the atmosphere was like that day, but the brush strokes in the sky feel a little less carefully observed to me. And I might be wrong. That might be just how they were, but I don't believe the sky to the same degree that I can absolutely get lost in the street scene in front of me. Also, the light standards. There's something that they read a little bit. Yes, they are repetitive, but there's something. I think the way that the aluminum extensions, the goosenecks, are painted, all three of them are painted kind of similarly. So they read a little bit like cookie cutter to me. The perspective, however, is excellent. And that quibble is pretty darn minor. So a really, really nice job by Katy Smith. Can we have the next one, please? It's me. Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. The next one is by Mary Beth Harrison, or maybe it's Mary Beth Addix Harrison, because that's her Facebook name. And I remember that it's called Well, Well, Well. I'm not big on titles, but I remember that it's called that. I wanted to discuss this for a couple of reasons. There are two paintings in this crit session that are large scale. The rest are like 8x10s and 9x12s. Very, very different how paint is handled in the large paintings and the small paintings. One of the beauties of small paintings is that the brush strokes tend to be much more live. They just have spontaneity that we tend to lose when working large. In this painting, there are beautiful passages. Look at how the amount of depth that she gets from the road in the foreground going all the way into the far background. The color values of the road into the far hills, that's beautiful, a beautiful transition. And the sky with the horizontal of those clouds has a wonderful scooping distance to it. The truck itself, I put this painting after the watercolor for a specific reason, which is note how carefully, and I applaud how carefully, she has witnessed the undercarriage and the wheels of the truck. On the other hand, the carefulness of that rendering makes it isolated, sort of, from the rest of the painting. The shadow cast by the rear of the truck onto the ground, I wish it touched the road. Everything's just a little too isolated in how the truck is presented. It is unto itself. I would urge her to consider losing a few edges. We don't need to see the wheels that precisely. There's a painter friend of mine named Patrick Lee out of Pittsburgh who is a master at doing something very precisely and then scraping it, or doing some way of lessening the overworking that can occur with painting. It's so easy to do. And I would just love to see the different components of this tie together a little bit more. Beautifully rendered also is the tree in the upper right. I wish that was a little bit more into the picture, because yes, it does touch those far hills, and the far hills do lead into the foliage in the middle distance, but it still is kind of just this isolated shape up in the sky. If there was more of the tree, if the trunk was in there, I just think it would tie into the painting a little bit better. The sky holes in the tree and the handling of the foliage is wonderful. And I applaud how nicely the foliage throughout this work is handled. None of it feels overly labored. And I like the punch of that red, of the red cab. Might be nice to have a couple of other bits of that red. Yes, it's on the safety stripes around the body of the truck part, of the trailer part. But I would like to see maybe a couple little red highlights, not overdoing it. They're pinkish highlights in the near grass on the right-hand side, and I can see another little pinkish element over by the phone pole on the extreme left, but maybe bump those up a little tiny bit. The red does reappear, of course, in the flag, and I would like to see actually the two man-made objects, the truck and the well drilling rig, have those touch or relate slightly more. The foliage coming in between the two. Yes, there's one sky hole in the foliage where you can see a bit of the structure of the well drilling rig, but I would like a little bit more of that. So the things of man, which are the utility pole, the road, the truck, and the well drilling rig, are all interlaced against the things of God, the natural world, the tree, the far hills, the sky, the ground on which the truck sits. Nice handling, as I said, the mark making on the road leads us into the distance really well. So there's a good sense of space in it. I think a very successful work, and I would love to see it in real life. Next one, please. This one it's an 8x10 acrylic. In this, I am so impressed with the precision of the vision of the bridge structure on the left-hand side, and the way the light is hitting that bridge and the foliage. I am, sign me up, sister. It is such a convincing bit of sleight of hand. It's hard to not be drawn into this scene and to think that it's actually an 8-inch by 10-inch piece of piece of canvas on which paint has been smeared. I don't know how you did it. I don't think you're using a squeegee, but the light on the railing and that the crisscrossing, the ironwork is superb, and the consistency of the light on the bridge, on the floor of the bridge, on the railing of the bridge, and then that light in the trees reads utterly believably. The composition, kind of it thrusts from lower left to kind of the middle right, where there's that light and the tree in the far distance. And that thrust is strong enough to carry us, because of the precision of that passage of the railing and the ironwork on that railing, that carries us through that dark area to the light spot back there. So it does have a good distance. Now, the railing on the right-hand side, I think, is far less successful. It does not, the brushwork does not have the same precision. I'm not sure it should have the same precision, but it's so reminiscent. It looks like it's trying to be the bridge on the left, and it isn't, as opposed to it being just either it should be simpler or it should be more carefully recorded. The perspective feels to me a little bit off, especially on the, Betty Sue, could we have the cursor on the lower right? Yes, this right there. The perspective feels off to me on that. I would be tempted to just darken that area down. It isn't necessarily part of the larger narrative, because the story that you're telling in this painting, it feels to me, is about the light. It feels like late, it's either early morning or fairly late afternoon, and the kind of lyrical quality of that light against the foliage and the side of the bridge. The right-hand side of the bridge, it's in shadow. It's not what the song is about. The brushwork on the tree in the light in the far distance, that feels a little bit, when you compare it to the precision of the ironwork in the light, it's like a story element that isn't quite developed enough, because we know that the object in light can be so precisely seen. Why is that object. The brushwork just it doesn't feel nuanced to me. I just think it doesn't quite tie together. It ties together chromatically and value-wise. It's just the mark making is different. I assume it's brick structure behind the bridge, kind of in the dead center of the painting. I would like to see that witnessed a little more carefully. I don't quite understand what is going on, exactly what the shape is. The foundation, where it gets lighter down in the foundation, again, I'm unsure. Again, it is because it is so superbly rendered in the area where you are drawing our primary attention. I like that there are elements of the red reappearing in the planks of the bridge. The foliage itself, Betty Sue, could we have the cursor from the upper right down to the center? Yes. Upper right, go the absolute upper right, and then down to that tree in the far light. Yes, that area of foliage, I would like to see a little more contrast on the edge between the far foliage that's in bright light and the shadow foliage that leads us down to the center. Because I mean, the composition is basically it's a bunch of triangles leading us to that spot of light with the tree in the far distance. I just would like to see that edge from the upper right that comes down into the center being a little bit sharper. Because it just gets muddy. The area between where it's light and where it's not light, about a quarter of the way down, is just so, it's pretty undefined. On the left-hand side, the sky holes in the tree in the light that give us the view to the structure behind, I think that's handled very, very well. So I would give the left-hand side of this painting a 100. The right-hand top half, 70, and the right-hand bottom half, about a 65. Okay, but gosh darn, that's a good bridge. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, this is another large painting, 30 by 20. This I just think has a beautiful atmosphere. I think it is just very, very successful. It's a very successful painting. The way that we, the viewer, are led into the far distance with that wonderful edge between. It's not the sharpest photograph I've ever seen in my life, and I had to resize it from there was like some lawn furniture, there was some background stuff in the original photo, so I cropped it down so it's not as sharp as it might be. But I'm assuming it is a river. So the river on the right, the shoreline, the edge of that shoreline is so nicely rendered in that the edge is lost at several places. Then it comes in nice and sharp. One of the tricks, ladies and gentlemen, to making a convincing journey into far distance is to keep your intersections of land and water as horizontals, not as verticals. The horizontal the horizontals that she's got going in the shoreline, it's the foreshortening that we see. That's why it is horizontals as opposed to verticals. People have a habit of, because they know it is talking about distance and moving backwards, they tend to want to point with their brush strokes, which means doing vertical brush strokes. What that does is it causes the viewer to float up in the air, and it feels like you're looking down on something. She hasn't done that here. With those horizontals, it lies, that river is lying down there, and we are going back, 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 back. Then look at the beauty of the reflection of those far trees in the water. That it's soft, there's enough of the shoreline showing to define that line across, but it's not, yes, exactly. But it's not overdoing it. She breaks that up. So it becomes the shoreline becomes a tit, dot, tit. It's like Morse code going across, beautiful stitching of the trees and the reflection of the trees. Then onto the landmass, the trees continue. The line at that shoreline becomes the delineation between the landmass and the forest. The whole depiction of the land on the left-hand side seems beautiful to me. It feels, the color palette very reminiscent of Hopper, it feels to me. The sky, the values, the consistency of values, I think is perfect in this painting. The chromatic decision, it feels like the bottom half is a little bit more in the world of yellows than the top half. Hard to tell from a slide, but just keep that in mind. However, I do see references to the pinks in the sky. I do see references to those in the land. So I'm not, it doesn't drive me crazy. And I might be wrong about it if I saw the actual painting. The only compositional suggestion I might make is I kind of would like to see the horizon line drop down slightly more. It feels a little bit high to me. It feels like it's almost in the center, but it's not. It's above the bottom third, but it's not high enough. It's not high enough to be a definite portrait of. I'm sorry, there's someone at the door, so I'm distracted for a second. It seems betwixt and between being the middle or the bottom third. So I'd like to see it a little bit lower. I just think that would make it a little bit stronger. But the simplicity of the composition and the beauty of the rendering, I think make this a winner of a painting. Really nice job. Do we have the next one? And this is a 12 by 24. 12 by 24s are one of my favorite formats. It's sort of how we as humans see, because we're predators. Predators have eyes on the front, whereas lunch has eyes on the side. Bunnies, eyes on the side. Tigers and lions, eyes on the front. So that feels very natural to me, this kind of panoramic way of seeing. The simple massing of the cityscape in the distance, I think is very effective. Not overworked at all. I like how dark she's willing to go, especially Well, see, I really like how she dropped the horizon. Well, it's not the horizon line, but the delineation between the water and the city. It's down in that. It's basically, Betty Sue, could you do a horizontal rule of thirds with the cursor? There's Betty Sue gone off to get a cup of coffee. Guess she may have gone. Oh, there she is. Rule of thirds. Lower third. Yep. All the way across. Middle third. All the way across. Top third. So total rule of thirds here. Now then, let's do the vertical rule of thirds. Big building in the background. The sailboat and the big building. See, this is a rule of thirds painting to a T. And it's just a very, very easy, dependable way to build an interesting composition. Having the mass of the cityscape being these horizontals, I think makes it very exciting, gives this sense of motion in the painting, even though, of course, there's nothing more static than a city from a distance. The thing in motion is the boat, but this is playing a neat trick by having the boat be kind of statically rendered, but the city feel in motion. The on the right-hand side, that kind of roseate side of the building in light, exactly. That's a beautiful passage. That light against the dark slab of the building immediately to its left, and then the darkness down by the shoreline all the way across. Yeah, over there in that left third. That's terrific. The boat itself, the rendering of the sails, especially that sail on the left, that reminds me so much of like Rockwell Kent and that great kind of 1930s almost social realism WPA mural. It has this heroic quality to it that I think works really well. If I was to suggest areas to work on, it would be the figure in the boat and the outboard motor. They're so in-betweeny in terms of they're sort of brushy and they're sort of rendered. They're neither quite one or the other. The cityscape is abstracted. The boat is pretty rendered. The figure and the outboard are a compromise. And that to me is that's the area of the painting where I go, I don't know about that. On the other hand, look at the beauty of the light on the hull of that boat. That just, I believe that, absolutely. I don't know a damn thing about boats, but the way that light is hitting, I'm there. The boat sits in the water really well. The color of the water, I think, is very successful. I think it's a wonderful third element between the boat and the cityscape, though there are elements of the color world reflected in the city itself. And the rigging or the bowline or whatever, the thin lines up by the sails there are very nicely done. They're not absolutely contiguous, so being a little bit broken up makes it a little bit more believable, because the way light hits something usually does have Nancy says, no kidding, I hate that sailor and dinghy. I am laughing out loud. All right, well then we're in agreement on that. Now that's not quite as triumphant as my crit the other day to another Dreamliner where I said, this reminds me of Tom Thompson's The Jack Pine. He says, I have that hanging in my living room. So at least, but it's neat to be simpatico that's the area of the painting that drives you nuts too. Well, that's a thing to think about. Remember, what we are we're storytellers, and that's just a paragraph in the story that doesn't quite fit the rest of the story. So if you were going to work on this more, that's the area that one would concentrate on. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in having a work that has a preponderance of success and a little bit of, I'd like to see that different. Doesn't mean you have to change it. It just means it's just an is. And even if all our friends say, oh, it's beautiful, don't ever change it. If you feel motivated to work on it more, trust your inner voice. Let's see. Is that the last slide, Betty Sue, or is there one more? It's the last slide. So, yep, that's it. So I hope that was useful. Looking at those works. One of the things, and those of you who saw my crit session last night at Plein Air Live, one of the joys of us doing this visual art thing is, as my friend and influence, Richard Schmid, has so eloquently put it, is painting lets you see what the world feels like through someone else's eyes. And I'm so honored to be let in to these five artists' view of the world. I'm so honored that they would like my opinion about how they've expressed it. And it's an endless journey that we're on, and we're part of a community in these ugly times. We're part of this community that values attempted, honest communication, and we're so lucky to have that. The great topical singer of the 1960s, Phil Oakes, who killed himself at age 36, I think. I think he was 36. He definitely killed himself. But on one of his last records, the last line of the liner notes was, "Oh, but in such ugly times, the true protest is beauty." And you guys have done beautiful work. So thank you for letting me be part of it. I would love it if you come over to my website, sign up for getting mailings from me, learn about Corduroy the Studio Cat. Join me on Tuesdays at 1:45 p.m. for the Eastern Daylight Time. There'll be Eastern Standard Time too, but 1:45 p.m. Tuesdays for the Reasonably Fine Art Talk, about a half hour each. And that's always up on the YouTube channel too. So thank you so much. Take care, wash your hands, and be wonderful to each other. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.